This is examples in music for objectives 1.17 as well as the next few objectives. Starting off with part of Pachelbel's canon. All right, objective 1.17a says properly identify and notate note heads, stems, and flags. By now you've read a little bit of that in our learning resources or in your own text. Let's look at how that's applied in this notation. Note heads are represented by these little circles. In this case, we have all filled in note heads. If we had half notes, then they would be open circles, but I don't have any of those in this particular piece. The note heads align with either as being on a line or a space, or the line of a space of a ledger line. This item here that's attached to the note head is called the stem. The stem can go up or down. This one is going up, this one is going down. The direction of the stem makes no difference to how the note is played. As you may have read, the direction of the stem is dependent on where the note head is placed. If the note head is below the middle line of the staff, then the stem generally goes up. If the note head is above the middle line of the staff, like here, then the stem usually goes down. If the note is on the middle line of the staff, the note head can go up or down. Notes that are shorter durations than quarter notes will have some sort of flag on them. Here's an isolated eighth note, and this item right here is called a flag. That's a single flag. If it was a 16th note, there would be two little flags there. And notes that involve flags can be beamed together, like is done here. These 4 16th notes are beamed together and the flags become double bars. These 2 eighth notes are beamed together. The single flag for each becomes a single bar. Instead of the word bar, I should probably be using the word beam. We'll learn more about specifics of proper beaming on a later objective. Objective number 117b says, identify the rhythmic values of whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, eighth notes, and 16th notes, and calculate how they relate to one another in terms of duration. Utilizing your learning resources, you should have read up on this now, or seen explanations of the different durations of notes. And in this segment, we can see durations of 3 note values in action. So we have quarter notes down here, and for every quarter notes, there are 2 eighth notes, taking up the same amount of space, and for every eighth note, there are 2 16th notes. Going along the same logic, for every 1 quarter note, there are 4 16th notes. In this particular example, the quarter notes are each worth 1 beat, which means that the eighth notes are each worth half of 1 beat, and which means each single 16th note is worth 1/4 of a beat. Keep in mind, though, that a quarter note is not always worth 1 beat, but the ratios of the notes to each other always do stay the same. So if we had a particular piece of music where the quarter note was worth 2 beats, for example, then the eighth note would be worth 1 beat, and the 16th note would be worth half a beat. The ratios, by comparison of notes, stay the same. Objective 1.18 says identify the rhythmic values of whole rest, half rest, quarter rest, eighth rest, and 16th rest, and calculate how they relate to one another in terms of duration. And we have a few of those rests included in this work. Here we have a whole rest notated. Here we have an eighth rest with 1 little flag. Here we have a 16th rest with 2 little flags. Just as with notes, the durations of rests are proportional to each other, and those stay constant. So a 16th rest is always 1/2 of an eighth rest. An eighth rest is always 1/2 of a quarter rest. However, a quarter rest might be worth 1 beat, or an eighth rest might be worth 1 beat, or a 16th rest might be the beat unit, depending on how the composer has set up the piece. For example, 119, here is an example of Chopin. Objective 1.19 says, explain what a dot does to a note or rest. And you should be able to tell me that definition by now. You learned that a dot adds 1/2 the duration to the note or rest that it is next to. For this example, when I talk about the dot duration, I'm going to speak about it in relation to actual note lengths rather than beats. So on the screen now, we see two types of dotted notes. Right from the start, we have a dotted eighth note, and then we have several dotted half notes in this work. If the dot adds half the value of what precedes it, we look at this dotted half note. So we ask ourselves, what is half of a half note? Half of a half note is a quarter note. Therefore, this is the length of a half note plus a quarter note. Another way of saying a half note plus a quarter note would be 3 quarter notes, the length of 3 quarter notes all held out. In this particular work, we can measure that out really nicely with the eighth notes that are in the bass clef. If you had 3 quarter notes, that would be equivalent to 6 eighth notes. So let's count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then the last two line up with the quarter note in that measure. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what is this one over here? The length of that is longer than an eighth note, but it's not adding a quarter note's length. The dot does not always add a quarter note. So it's an eighth note plus half of an eighth note, and half of an eighth note is a 16th note. So this is as if we had an eighth note plus a 16th note in terms of duration.